This is Rob Tebber for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. Delighted, as always, to be joined by former world champion TV analyst, sometimes co-host of the Boxing Social podcast, Barry Jones. How are you, Barry?
All right. Where's my Boxing Social podcast? I turned up the other week. You wouldn't let me in. So it was just the weirdest feeling. Like between you and BT knocking me back, I don't know if my ego can take it any longer.
we got a call from someone who says suspicious man hanging around outside the podcast studio, but
fair enough. I can't argue with that.
Barry Social will be back soon, up and running after the lockdown. Barry, talk to me about the fights last night. Dubois versus Joyce, promised a lot, delivered. Great fight.
It was. I think it wasn't the barnstormer that maybe we could have had, but it was. I thought it was very intelligent from Joyce. I really do. You know, we sort of see him as rigid, which he is, easy-ish to hit, which he can be almost most of the time, and no. So we equate that with him not being a good boxer, but we forget, and we did forget, and he showed that he was tactically very, very clever. That he took the space of Dubois early. Dubois likes to be the one coming forward, putting you under pressure, even if it is behind an educated jab from Dubois. The fact that he took the centre of the ring and tried to push Dubois back took away the jab of Dubois. Plus, Joyce was coming forward, but sitting on that back foot, which makes it a longer distance of hit. So you feel the pressure with the front foot, but you're out the distance with the jab. And so Dubois couldn't establish that left hand, which is so important for him to get a foothold in the fight. But when Dubois adapted after the first round, he got lower in the second and started to throw the jab up and was having effect doing that because he was coming in nice and low and throwing it up, and Joyce couldn't defend against it. Then he had more success, but he couldn't stick to that. And a lot of that is to do with Joyce. And also what Joyce did very well was when he threw the jab, he dipped his head to the right, which means that just meant that there was a longer distance to travel for that right hand of Daniel Dubois. And they had to come down with it over the top and come down. And it was just too far for him, and he missed too often. And when he did land, except for a few really good right hands, by the way, that he caught Joyce with, Joyce looked like he was riding the shot, but I just think he was just out of distance for Dubois. But again, like Joyce's chin is tremendous. People say he didn't take a lot of shots. He took enough right hands that would have had most, if not all, heavyweights in trouble. And was it too early for Dubois? I don't think it was too early. I think did he get exposed? I don't think he got exposed. I think he got beat by a guy who was a little bit more experienced, of course, and had the better game plan and just took away his strengths. That happened. So I think it was a good learning fight for him. He didn't take a hammering, and he never. So he can come back. He's young enough to come back. It was more important for Joyce to get the win because of his age. Even though he's fresh, his age was a worry where he rebuilds. But he got the win, well deserved. You know, I don't think there was any argument. He might have probably was going ahead to win on points, I would have thought. Though not by the official cards, as I found out later. But on my card, I thought he was probably going to win on points. But unless Dubois could really, really have a strong finish.
You mentioned the opening to the fight. It was something that I found to be quite key from watching it. Joe Joyce really getting in, as you mentioned there, taking the distance away from Daniel Dubois and making him fight off the back foot from the first bell. How important was that for Joe's momentum leading into the following rounds of the fight?
Yeah, it was. But to be fair, though, you sort of say that and think that, but then Dubois took it off him in the second. But because Joyce his whole demeanour with Joe Joyce is so relaxed and cool and calm. But you can see that in the ring, even though he didn't have a great second round, got caught with some good shots. It didn't faze him. He went about his work again in the third. He wasn't deterred by what happened in the second and still stuck to the game plan. So it's important when you've got a guy who's a big puncher. I wouldn't call Dubois a bully as such, but that he has to hit you with a big solid left hand to set it all up, make you scared to throw a shot, and then he can line you up with the long shots. And when you're moving forward with punches and you're used to doing that, your judgment of the distance is better and you can get more power because you're pushing off the back leg because you're a forward momentum movement. But when you have to do that as a counter puncher, which he's not, or do it when you're moving back, it reduces the power, the distance, the timing, and your whole rhythm's off. So yeah, I think it was important that he took the centre of the ring, Joe Joyce, and he did it quite easy, I have to be honest. It wasn't an easy fight for him at all because he still had to take shots. And I sort of put a tweet out yesterday saying, it's easy to say, the chin of Dubois won him the fight. And it was much more than that. It was the way he went about his work, the things I just said just now. But without that chin, a lot of those tactics don't work. That's the truth. You can't just say that. He's more than that, but he boxes knowing he has a good chin. He doesn't dine out in it. He doesn't look to take punches, but he can have the confidence going forward, thinking I might have to take a shot, but I think I can. And that's what, you know, most people would be really tentative to just go and steal the space of Dubois for worrying to take that right hand. You would have a little bit more tentativeness about your work, but he never went full of confidence that he could maybe absorb some of the shots early, and he did.
What did you make to the end of the fight, Barry? Obviously, that's a big talking point as far as took a knee and saw out the 10 count. Always interested to get your opinion as an ex-fighter, of course.
Yeah, he counted himself out. It's like, to say quit's a horrible word, because I don't think he's a quitter. And once you say the word quit, you're accusing him of having no ball. And I wouldn't say that's the case. But he did. He stayed on his knee when he didn't have to. And I know the eye could be bad. It could just be swollen. And I'm sure it's really painful. Like, we've all had pain in the ring. I've had ribs hanging out, and other people have had worse things than myself. But if you can get up, you'd like to think, you don't know until you're in that situation, by the way. Like, we always revert back to ourselves as boxers, because then that's all we can empathise with the other fighter. But I've never been down on the floor in my life until my last fight. So you don't know how you're going to react when you're hurt, when you're being put down. So you'd like to think that you do all the right things. You'd like to think that. You'd like to think you'd have the courage to get up and fight on. And you'd like to think you just give it your all, and someone else could save you, or you get knocked out. That's what you want. And Dubois never did that. That'll haunt him for a while. There will be question marks over his that bully mentality, maybe, if you can put it on him and hurt him, that he won't want to know. But I'm not so sure that's the case. I think his eye was bad. He panicked. He didn't know what to do. The fact that he took the knee wasn't a bad thing. You know, you don't know where you are. If you're really hurt, you don't know where you are, and you can't see, then take a knee to save yourself for later on in the fight. But he stayed there. And it might have been painful, we don't know, but yeah, there'll be question marks over that. I can see why all the fighters on my timeline, the ex-fighters, most of them, not all of them, are saying he quit. I can understand that, because he did count himself out. He had the chance to get up, and he didn't. And that'll be a worry. That would be a worry if I was with him, if I didn't know him too well, if I was his manager or his promoter rather than his trainer, who probably know him well. And also, it was his first hard fight. It was his first, test of adversity in the ring, and he didn't come through it. But that doesn't mean he won't come through in the past. That doesn't mean he won't learn and grow from that. But that question mark will remain for a while. That's just how it works, I'm afraid. In this business where everyone thinks they're macho and it's all a game of bravado at times, then that will stick with him until he proves otherwise.
You mentioned Joe Joyce being kind of his first real significant step up. Did this just highlight the fact that you can't go from an Ebenezer Tete, Richard Lartey, Kaituri Fujimoto to a Joe Joyce?
Well, it would in any other weight, but I think heavyweight division is quite different. I think you have to show more attributes at different weights, as crazy as that sounds. But as a heavyweight, if you show you have that physical power and a good jab, which he did have, then you could theoretically beat most people, to be honest, with that as a heavyweight, because power is a massive factor in that division, more than any other division. So they don't have to be as technically gifted as other weights, because that power will shine through all that. But it was a bigger step up, but I don't think it was a step out of the realms of possibility for him. I fancied him to win. But I did say, obviously, as well, if I fancied him to win, but it was the unique situation where I would never do it normally, that I've gone against what you know to what you expect. So you sort of went on Dubois with his potential rather than what he's actually done. And that's what it was. But I think Joyce is brilliant. So I don't think it was a step up for him, and it didn't work out, but I don't think it was a crazy step up. And also in this generation where fighters are getting world title fights easier than ever, or playing the organizational minor title game where that gives you a ranking maybe before you deserve it, then no, it certainly wasn't in that respect.
What next for Daniel Dubois? Obviously, now the unbeaten record is gone. The bubble has burst somewhat, and a difficult end to the fight for any fighter to overcome mentally as well as physically with the eye. What next for him? A rebuild?
Yeah, a rebuild, but no, I don't think it's a massive rebuild. I just think it is he's young. as well. That's the problem. Everyone's being rushed too young, and what does that do? You know, it keeps you in the game too long. If you want to rebuild, but you can't give him loads another 5 like easy fights, because what's that going to do? People are going to expect something off him now, and expect him in a big fight to maybe bottle it. That's what's going to happen. So you don't want a war for him, but you don't want someone who's just going to follow when they hit him. Back years ago in the 80s and 90s, he would just fed him another 5 or 6, people he could just blast out, looking great. Everyone would forget. But with social media, clips keep coming up to remind you what happened. So you can't do that now. It's a different way you have to promote a fighter. So I think a relatively easiest fight of someone maybe a name that we know, but not at world level, at domestic level, and realise that you're behind Joe Joyce for a while. But he wasn't massively behind. They had Joe Joyce a few rounds up. But it wasn't a fight that Dubois couldn't have won. But I still felt like Joyce was the one who was going to win it by whether it was stoppage or I didn't see Joyce stopping Dubois. It was only the eye. I don't think he really hurt Dubois. I don't think he was trying to really hurt him. He was just trying to make Dubois work hard, which he did. But he was picking up the punch with that really not beautiful jab, but very effective jab. And that's what it was, really. That jab just made Dubois reset all the time. Every time he just threw it, and it wasn't loads on it, but enough to stop him from walking forward. And I think it was tactically very clever from Joyce. But Dubois can rebuild. He just that stigma is going to stay with him for a little while. And it's how he deals with that mentally. When you've got everyone, I used to have a friend as an amateur, and it was a supersonic schoolboy fighter, like knocking people out when he was 13. It was just tremendous. And he said, everyone can't be wrong. When everyone's telling me how good he was, he said, everyone can't be wrong. Everyone's telling me I'm brilliant. I must be brilliant. He's not really up his own backside at that stage of his life. And that was probably with Dubois. Everyone telling you you're going to be a world champion, you're brilliant. And we got great people in his camp. Just the public and everyone, and people are pundits. We're all saying, he was potentially going to be a world champion. And still might be. But that's going to be hard now, because that's not going to be said anymore. So it's mentally how you deal with that. And people blowing smoke up your backside, and for the justifiable reasons, but now that's gone. And there's question marks for the first time, and there's criticism for the first time, and there's all those, and question marks over your courage and who you are inside. That's the worst. So but it can make you or break you. It might give him a real point to prove, and a little bit of chip on your shoulder that a lot of fighters need to propel him to greater heights. But listen, it's not about him though. No, that's the worry, and that's the worry with, because he's young and the potential. We always and nowadays, because we're all afraid to upset anybody, as I've mentioned before on podcast, we're all trying to sympathise with the promoter's guy and the kid who lost, because he's a nice kid. But it's Joe Joyce's moment. Be fair, he's Olympic silver medalist. He had a better pedigree as a professional, beat better people, and he was the underdog. And with everyone, pretty much, with everyone who didn't know him. There you go. People who knew him with loyalty, or knew what we didn't see in the gym, and they fancied him, but most people didn't. And he proved everyone wrong. And that's the known thing. He wasn't a good fighter, didn't give him a chance, but you have to pick a side. Of course, that's most people's job. But it's his moment. He boxed perfect. To be honest, I thought he was fantastic. He boxed it. It wasn't just like, you can't hurt me and then I'm going to stop you. He made Dubois think, and he made Dubois do things he didn't want to do, and he took away what Dubois was good at. He took away his jab, and Dubois struggled most of the fight. Even some of the rounds he was winning, it wasn't. He had to work hard, and I thought Joyce was fantastic, and now he moves on. Where he goes, it's a really hard division, but and you'd fancy fighting him. If I was if I was Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, Usyk, Dillian White, you would fancy Joe Joyce, because you think he's squared up and he walks forward and you can hit him, and he can hit him and I'll hurt him. But he keeps proving people wrong, doesn't he? To be fair, because he looks that way. But he wasn't as easy to hit last night, and he wasn't just walking forward, and he had more bounce to his step, and he moved his head now and again, and he sat on the back foot, and he made you overreach. And he didn't try and knock you out and be a macho man. He tried to box behind the jab. So, you don't win, as Richie Woodall said a few times, you don't win gold, silver medals in the Olympics for just being a brawler.
Well, that was kind of where I was going to next. We saw after the fight, Joe Joyce has been calling out Alexander Usyk. They've got unfinished business from the WSB. Is that the fight that you'd like to see for him next? Tony Yoka's called him out, who we saw in action against Christian Hammer a couple of days ago.
That was an action.
Yeah, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. What do you like to see next for Joe Joyce?
Listen, you take the fight. If he gets a world title shot, take it. At his age, but anyway, no, just take it. And but if you can't, that Yoka fight's a good fight. It's a great storyline. He should have maybe won the Olympic gold medal, and he never against Yoka. And also, it's a fight that he can win. I think Yoka looks like a real talent, but he looks so physically weak, unbelievable. And he got a nice jab and never wants to throw it because he lacks confidence in his physical strength. So I could see Joyce walking right through him, and that's a great storyline. But if you're offered the Usyk fight, which would probably be for the vacant title, you could see that happening. You would have to take that, and take that now while Usyk's still growing into the weight. Usyk will fancy boxing him, but I think Joyce will fancy over that longer distance. I know he's developed that he can make Usyk work really hard. Like people going about that. I think I had someone say last night maybe Chisora caused Usyk problems. I didn't really see how he caused him too many problems, to be honest. But the physical strength was evident. I think that the size was a bit more evident than I'd seen in any other Usyk fights, of course. But he still handled it quite comfortable. He just had to move more, which he can. Can he do that for 12 rounds with Joyce? Maybe, maybe not. But you take the fight. I don't think. I'm going to say he deserves a world title shot, but I'm not sure just beating Daniel Dubois warrants that. To be fair, because it was a British European level, and rightly so. Great, but it puts him in the conversation. That's the truth. And so you want to get in the mix with Joshua and Fury. That's where you want to be, because that's life-changing money, and you go home and then you never have to fight as long ever again. And so you get to 54, and then you can have an exhibition with some other old man. But that's the fight you want. But the Yoka fight is a really interesting thing where I think he can really do a number and avenge a loss that maybe wasn't deserved.
Okay, well, Barry, always a pleasure catching up. If you're going to let you go, because I know you're desperate to go and rewatch Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones.
I haven't. I don't do this.
Always a pleasure catching up with you. Very much speaking to Boxing Social. We'll get you back in the podcast soon. Boxing Social podcast, the Barry Jones Social podcast coming soon.
Don't forget it. Take care, Rob.
Cheers, Barry. Thank you, mate.
Bye.